Welcome to the Ring of Light, the last gene key in the Ring of Light. And this is for feminine, evolutionary, visionary leaders. That's the positive side of gene key 11. That's the brilliance and the glory. And we all have this. We have all these codes inside of ourselves. And sometimes when you don't have this gate lit up in your chart, you can see it better. You can play with it better. There may be an inconsistency with it, but you can see it better. So listen for yourself. Listen to what can inform the most expansive being in your connection with the light. And what's present from the very beginning. I think this is important because as spiritual people, we use the word light all the time. And really, light, I like the way Richard Rudd says it. It's the glory of God, right? It's the glory of God. It's your conscious awareness. It's the truth of who you are. And light is the best way that spiritual teachers, people, experimenters have pointed to that ineffable thing. The light of consciousness. It's the who and what you really are. I was looking back through my notes on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. My gosh. And preparation for this, because yes, it weaves into Gene Key 11 in the Ring of Light. And there is a level upon death where there is what Andrew Holochek describes as a thermonuclear explosion. I loved that. I loved that thought. A thermonuclear explosion of light. Bam! It's the Big Bang. It's us. We are the Big Bang. And so Gene Key 11 has so much light and also so much shadow. Isn't that the truth of how this polarity works? The greater the light, the greater the shadow. But at least we can know that, so that when that shadow shit shows up in us, we know that there's great light hidden inside. And that's the teaching of the Gene Keys. So as we explore Gene Key 11 and we end our series of the Ring of Light, we are looking at the shadow of obscurity, the gift of idealism, and the Siddhi of light. And this is a gene key that can hijack the consciousness of spiritual people. So there's a lot of themes that we get to weave in here. I say this gene key is for the visionary leader because this is really an expansive gene key of seeing through. It's a teacher gene key. It's someone who's come here to change the world. And, you know, those are big aspirations. Those are ideal aspirations. So you can kind of now get a flavor for the idealism of, yep, we're going to change the world. And the world looks the same after I die, right? The world looks the same after every change agent has died. Let's just say that. But we come in with this big aspiration to know who and what we really are. I think that's the name of the game. That's the deeper thing. And as a visionary feminine leader, because I'm gonna highlight a couple things. Feminine, this gene key is right brain. So if you didn't get it when you were reading it, it's because it's super right brain. It's like all over the place. It doesn't give a shit about being linear. It comes from the world of archetypes. It comes from the world of pictures and symbols. This is probably why I'm obsessed with the imaginal realm, the imaginal world, World 24, because it's the world of magic. It's the world of miracles. It's the world of Gene Key 11. And it breaks that entrained autopilot of World 48, where we are here, the ego self. And the price of admission, we've talked about this all year since the summer when we did this transmission on the map of consciousness. There's a price of admission. And the price of admission is humility, because Gene Key 11's shadow is a huge ego. And what is the huge ego around? Believing something, drinking your own Kool-Aid, believing religion. It really started out like that, right? Because we came from very dogmatic religion in the Western world. And the Western world colonized other worlds and gave them dogmatic religion. This belief system of knowing that I am right. And I get it, because what's behind that in the right brain and the archetypes and the pictures and the symbols is confusing. It's humbling. It can fill you with fear and uncertainty. And so the mind's response is to lock in on a belief and think it knows something. And so we're going to break that trance here in this transmission. The visionary part is Gene Key 11, comes from the 11th gate of the I Ching. And this is known affectionately as the idea factory, because it is truly connected to imagination. With Gene Key 11, it fits so well with visionary leaders because all things are possible. You can start to feel that idealism coming through. And if we didn't live in a world where all things were possible, it would be pretty depressing. So there are those who bring the light by saying, it's possible. It's all possible. And so the price of things being possible is to break down the ego. And that's why this teaching really leads me to the teaching of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It really leads me to trauma work. It really leads me to parts work. Some of you are on the call, but this week, Claire Dash and I did a call, Nourish, to heal your nervous system and to uncover your trauma. And the more that I do this, and it's like the Gene Keys. Every time I have a public event, I go through the gauntlet of whatever it is that I'm bringing forward. And so the day before that event, I was talking to friends about their trauma. And I really think that the reason why Gene Key 11 goes so mental and it really disavows the feminine and it goes into the left brain is because of the trauma field that's contained inside the right brain. Now, Dan Siegel has this theory of wellness that it's this integration of the left and right brain. Because if you are traumatized in your right brain, then you are stuck on images. And I would add even emotions, images. It's really the province of the right brain. It could be even sounds and smells. And when you're stuck on that and you're traumatized in that space and you don't know how to work with it, you try to shut that down. And you shut that down through being super linear, super closed-minded, myopic. His name is Dan Siegel. He wrote a book called Mindsight, and then The Biology of We, lots of things. He's such a great psychiatrist, MD. He supported a lot of people getting off of meds and using insight meditation to heal themselves of OCD and bipolar, all kinds of things. He just kind of figured out that presence actually heals you. So I love that work that came through. And his acknowledgement that the trauma in the right brain is what we're running from oftentimes. And I love that Gene Key 11 is contextualizing this because it's helping me and therefore you, understand that those pictures and images, like in the dream space, in that liminal space, are really archetypes that are streaming through us. Now, there's some interesting things about archetypes. So Gene Key 11 is the province of archetypes. That's where archetypes come through in the Gene Key world. Now, archetypes, I love Carolyn Mace's work on this because she's so clear about archetypes. Archetypes are structures of consciousness, structures. So archetypes help us organize our thinking around these images. And also, we are born with a certain archetypal pattern. And that is our personality. That is, like, you can find your archetypal personality in the work of the Enneagram. So whatever number you are, you possess the archetype of that number. Astrology has archetypes. Planets are archetypes. So Venus is an archetype. And when she's in a particular house in your astrology chart, that's how Venus works with you, your blueprint. So you can see that the universe is ordered. And Carolyn May said this really cool thing when I was listening to her audio on archetypes, that there's a timing for everything. The universe is structured. And that's Gene Key 5 in the Ring of Light. And she's like, you can't rush your timing, and you can't undo your timing. And I love to think of it that way because it's structure, and Gene Key 11 is going to work better with structure. Remember, Gene Key 60 talks about how magic loves structure. So 11 brings the magic, but it can get lost in a cesspool of images that don't mean anything. If you've ever gone on a medicine journey, like psilocybin medicine journey, taken a vision journey dose, there's this period at the beginning that can happen to some people, happens to me, where it's just these bizarre images. It could also happen in, ayahuasca journeys, anything plant medicine that takes you into that imaginal space, the multidimensional space, the space of images, symbols. And it could just be this chaotic, disorganized series of images. I remember one journey, I had lots of flashes of the TV shows I used to listen to when I was a kid. I considered that one of my worst journeys. Like, I was just like, what is the point of this? And that disorganized quality is the disorganization of the feminine right brain archetypal world. Now, it can also go off the rails when in spiritual circles, people are channelers or past life regressive teachers, teachers who do that. It can go off the rails in forming a structure, which then means a belief about how the universe works. And sometimes we really like those people because they organize some things and we're like, oh, okay. And all I have to do is just believe. But Gene Key 11 is not interested in true believers. Gene Key 11, as well as all the Gene Keys, are interested in your own gnosis, knowing for yourself what is true. And so I've long held that, entities that get channeled and things like that are really vestiges of these archetypes and also of myself. So that I'm not outsourcing truth. Instead, I get to be here with learning what my truth is. And it's a slippery slope, like, how many times do I want a reading? How many times do I want to do the pendulum? How many times am I pulling a card? And I think all of that's great because it does reflect back our consciousness. And then I'm often in the place of, and you get to choose. And it, they're like, it's you with you. Restoring our power to ourselves. Yeah, we can get addicted to the need to know. Exactly. So in restoring our power to ourselves, that's the movement forward. So when 2027 hits, according to the teachings of human design and the gene keys, that next phase is that there's really a majority of empowered humans, that we really know who we are. And so we're getting to this place that the role of a visionary leader, a feminine visionary leader, is to support your descent into your shadow, to see the matrix, so that when you descend, and how many times have we talked about this inside the gene keys, when you descend and you confront your matrix, you confront your fears, the archetypes of your fears. Like, let's say one of the archetypes of your fears is being abandoned. Let's say that you have a dream of being abandoned. So when you confront the archetype of that fear, the abandoner or the wounded child, where I have given away my power to the abandoner, to the person who can abandon me, as if that's freaking possible, right? You can start to see that the mind gets hijacked in that duality, and it becomes a victim. And so when we confront that archetype, and I say confront, but it's really such a loving way of being with our parts. And that's why I love the work that Claire Dash is doing with Evolving Sisters in her course, Transforming Trauma, and in the Healing Circle. And I swear, every person should take this course. Every person. Because getting familiar with your trauma means that you are on your way to the light, but you got to go down to do it. You got to meet those voices. And I'm going to say something about the Tibetan Book of the Dead, if I remember in a second about that. But so we're going to descend, meet those voices, and there, more capacity for light. And what does that mean? More capacity to know who and what you really are. So if you've been on the path and you've been doing that, you already know, because you've seen the progress of the way that you used to handle things and the way that you handle things now. And as Carolyn May said, these archetypes are not going away from planet Earth. They are here. And our job, and I love that she said this, is to move the archetypes forward in our lives. To move the archetypes forward in our lives. So that wounded child archetype, or the saboteur archetype, or the prostitute archetype, our job is to meet that and move it forward. I being a Gene Key 11 idealist, say that no gains in consciousness are lost. No gains in consciousness are lost. This is what we're doing on level 48. And it doesn't look like we're transforming level 48, but we're transforming ourselves. We're transforming our relationship to our archetypes inside of us. And that's what has us able to access world 24. So the Tibetan Book of the Dead brings a very important piece to this work. The Gene Key 11 says, if you want to wake up and know who you really are, you got to do that now. Because if you die, Andrew Holochek says, if you die before you die, you won't die. Who's the you that won't die? The you that cannot die. And that's the light. That's the glory of God. So our role here is to surround ourselves and train our minds for that death that comes all the time, for that descent. Seeing your shadow is a descent. It's a death. because you really are not that wounded child. And so gene key 11 paired with gene key 56 is like, let me create a story about that. And if I create a story about that, then I'm like living my trauma. It's my identity that I was abandoned. And so when we meet it, we get to allow it to dissolve. And this is a really interesting thing about archetypes, that it's definitely, death is like an ayahuasca journey. When you go on the journey, you open yourself up to your archetypes. So if you are, let's say, a devout Catholic, or maybe you came from there and you worship Jesus in a certain way, you worship Mary in a certain way, you have the images of Jesus and Mary, maybe iconography, like it looks a certain way. When chances are, when you do plant medicine, it's going to look that way. Also, the Tibetan Book of the Dead says when you die, it's going to look that way. So it's important to, one of the teachers said, ritualize your phenomenon. So what are the things you want to feed yourself that support that dissolution of the ego, particularly in that moment of death? I've been thinking a lot about this. And it's not to outsource our power to that archetype. It is to surround our consciousness with the energy of that archetype. So for some people, Jesus and Mother Mary is what's going to get them through, right? Because that thermonuclear blast, if you don't have like trained mind, what happens is people shut off and they go blank. They just shut down. And that's where their incarnation, their next incarnation, goes on autopilot. We can kind of, like, that's what's happening here. So can't we kind of imagine that? And this is, you know, from Andrew Holochek and his work on lucid dreaming and the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So it's a context. This is a context of how to hold what's actually happening here, and the break with the ego self, the ego constructed self. This is why it's a huge gene key, but all gene keys, when they get to the Siddhi level, are concerned with letting go of the identity. Colleen says, you are speaking my language. I'm glad this is landing. Yes, the most important decision we make, how we live and die. Thank you, Lori Grace. Yeah, it's big stuff. And, you know, so let's just sum this up. Gene Key 11 packs a lot of power in imagination. You have the energy to use your imagination to your fullest capacity. Now you can imagine that's neutral. It's going to go into the shadow realm of constructing a bunch of beliefs, and it could be in any way, spirituality, new age, religion, science, it doesn't matter. It's just like rigid beliefs about how things are. Thank God I have an open crown, because anytime I get there, like, then some new idea comes and I'm onto that. So, but if you have a fixed crown, if you have a defined crown, you're just like, that's a fixed way of thinking. And there's some gift in that, in bringing that to the world. There's some structure, there's some clarity, there's some focus to it. And we can't drink our own Kool-Aid. So we're always in this both and dance. And so obscurity gets lost in the details. It gives its power away. It thinks it knows. And the truth is, the ultimate truth of reality is we don't know shit. We really don't know. We only see in part, and we only see really narrowly in part. And neuroscience knows this. It knows that the brain filters out tons of information, because otherwise we would go mad. So it shows up in our dream space. It shows up in the liminal places. It leaks out here and there. And this is why World 24 is so fun, because when you start to put structure to it, when you start to be conscious of it, when you start to direct your thinking, and you have some say in where your mind goes. And that say, when you build it up over time, when you've learned to die to all the things, like I want to respond back so badly in that text. I just want to just tell them off in the text. And when you die to that, that's a victory for your moment when you're going to do the big dying, because you've learned to let go so many times. You've learned like the ego is just not going to run my life. And I'm going to use systems like the Enneagram. I'm going to do parts work and trauma work to see the archetypes inside of me and meet them, acknowledge, accept, embrace. So that what? And so that I can get to the glory of God, the who I really am. Like, it's like removing. The path of enlightenment isn't adding to, it's taking all the stuff away. Last week we talked about is cleaning the glass. And so the pathway to that is idealism. And the idealism is standing for heaven on earth, being a stand that it's possible, being a stand that it matters how I think, the way that I think. And that in this body mind, I can actually ascend, like standing for it, believing that, and then letting go of how it looks. Because life always looks different than what we think it should look like. And that is my central teaching of Gene Key 11. That's the crucible I walk through. Your life work will always give you a crucible, but the programming partner will support you. It will support you in the gifts that you need for that life work. And the programming partner is on the gift level is discernment. You'll learn the discernment after drinking all the Kool-Aids. Someday you learn, oh, wait a second, that actually gets me to give my power away. Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. And so we'll wrap up here that the role of the visionary leader is to take you into your own darkness, to take you into your own shadow, to take you into your own pain, to meet it with love, with compassion, to meet these images that in the background really control everything. The feminine, she's powerful. She doesn't have to, the masculine, let it do its thing, build its businesses, all this stuff, but she's like the unconscious underneath it, really moving. And so the idealism is to allow us to go down there, because we know that in that descent is the light of God. And ultimately it is to see your own light. And that's what we're moving into. So we get to look at the places where we've given our power away. We get to all the little insidious places where we idealize someone else as knowing, and that we don't know. I run up against this all the time in running a business, all the time in putting myself out there, all the time. I'm constantly having to go back to this over here. I'm like, no, they know. No, they don't know for you. And that doesn't mean you can't get advice and learn structures, but it means ultimately the buck stops with you. And are you willing to take a stand for yourself? Are you willing to be wrong? Are you willing to fail? Are you willing to meet your shadow? Those are the things of Gene Key 11. Because the world is Maya. The world is Maya. It's an illusion. And someday we'll have that moment of seeing through the illusion. And then we'll go back to Maya. And then we'll have a moment. And we'll go back to Maya. And then we'll have a moment. But those moments will grow and grow as the glass gets cleaner and cleaner. And we'll begin to feel the glory of God that we are.